So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over some GCSE Maths Higher Revision big mark questions taken from some past papers. Now in this video we'll be going over some questions which you can download by clicking on the link in the description along with its mark scheme as we go through the answers of those questions in this video. So the 5 big mark questions we're going to go through in this video are covering the following topics. So question 1 looks at quadratic sequences, and that's going to be 4 marks, which is going to be non-calculator. Question 2 is the area of a sector in a triangle using Sine rule and also use of exact values of Trig and Surds, which is going to be 4 marks, and that's non-calculators again. We're then looking at question 3, which looks at number facts, product rule for counting, which again is going to be non-calculator. Question 4 is looking at bearings, cosine, angles on parallel lines, which is going to be for 4 marks. And our final question is looking at algebraic fractions. Now, just a few things to note before we get started, that you can download a copy of the questions by clicking on the link in the description. And I strongly recommend that you do have an attempt at each of these questions before watching through this video, just so you can see how far you would get with each of these questions and see if you could get full marks without being given or guided how to get to the answer. And I'll also include the mark scheme attached to this document so you can see where the marks are allocated, and also they will also show you alternative methods, as your method might be different to how I approached each question, so you can see whether it's still valid or not. Also, that all questions are taken from past exam papers, so you may have seen these questions before, or they may be repeated if you work through some future past papers in your revision. And it's also worth noting that with big mark questions, they are not always exclusive to a topic. So be aware that big mark questions aren't just going to involve one topic, they could involve other topics that are on your revision schedule. Now, if you've not printed out the question, you may want to pause the video so you can have a look at the question and have an attempt at it before we go through the answers now. So looking at question 1, this question clearly represents a quadratic sequences question. The reason for that is because it says it in the question. So looking at the question, it says that the first 2 terms of a quadratic sequence are 10 and 17. Here is some information about the sequence, and what we've got this, and it's already given indication about the first difference and the second difference, for that which we then need to work out the nth term. So the first thing you may want to do when working through this question is just to fill in the missing numbers that have been blanked out. So here the third term in the quadratic sequence is where we add 13, so that's going to be 30, and the missing first difference is going to be the plus 6, so it's going to be 13 plus 6, which is 19. And then from this we can then work out the fourth term of the sequence is going to be 49. So what we need to do is we need to work out the nth term of this quadratic sequence. Now, how you set your work out may make this question easier or more difficult, so let me just move the screen down. So here, one thing we notice that as they've told us what the second difference is, so as the second diff, or the double difference I call it, equals 6, that means that 3n squared is in the nth term. So that we know is definitely going to be in the formula. So then if I draw my table of n, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I've got the numbers in the sequence, which are 10, 17, 30, and 49. I'm then going to do n squared, which is 1, 4, 9, and 16, which is always useful when you're working with quadratic sequences. So therefore 3n squared is going to be 3 times the red numbers, so that's going to be 3, 12, 27, and 48. So it just means that writing the n squared just makes it easier for me to work out what 3n squared is to go from there. Now in terms of the nth term, so the nth term is basically going to be 3n squared. I need to add this difference. So if I just write plus d, it's going to be very squashed, but if I just write plus d, and the green number to the orange number is going to be plus d. So the nth term is 3n squared plus the difference, which I've just abbreviated as d. Now I don't want to put brackets in there because that might seem confusing, so let me just call it the diff. So then from this, if I then work out what the difference is, well, the difference from 3 to 10 is 7, so it's plus 7. Then the difference from 12 to 17 is plus 5. Then it's plus 3. And then it's plus 1. So now what I need to do is to find the formula for the difference of looking at these numbers. Now one thing you should be able to spot is that this is going to be a linear sequence. So from this I need to take away 2. So then in the formula for the difference is going to be minus 2n. And then what you have to add to the difference to get to the first term? Well, you need to add 9. So the formula for the difference is going to be minus 2n plus 9. So therefore the nth term is going to be 3n squared plus the difference, which is minus 2n plus 9, and there is my final answer. Moving on to question 2, which relates to area, relates to area of a sector and a triangle, surds and exact values of trig. So again, if you've not had a chance to print off this question, I strongly recommend you pause the video, have a go at the question, and then unpause as we go through the answer. So looking at this particular question, the question is asking us to work out the shaded area. Now the shaded area for these questions is always the big shape, take away the small shape. And in this case, the big shape is the area of the sector minus the area of the triangle. Now for this, what you then need to do is try and recall the formulas to work out the area of a sector. So that's going to be theta over 360 multiplied by pi r squared. And the formula for the area of a triangle, well, it's base times height divided by 2, but we don't know the height of this triangle. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to use AB sine C, or half AB sine C. Now in terms of working out the values of each of these, we know that theta is going to be 60 degrees and r is 5 centimeters. And for the area of the triangle, well, that's going to be A, that's going to be B. So A is 5, B is 5, and angle C is 60 degrees. So then working out each of these, let me just do that here. So the area of the sector is going to be, in substituting the numbers in, is going to be 60 over 360 multiplied by pi times the radius squared, which is 5 squared. And that becomes 1 over 6 multiplied by pi times 25, which equals 25 pi over 6. Now I'm going to assume this question is non-calculated, so I'm going to try and keep things as exact values. And the reason why I know that is because if I look at how they want me to write the answer, it's pretty obvious that I'm going to be needing exact values. So this answer here is the area of my sector. So the next thing for me then to do is to then work out what the area of the triangle is going to be. So the area of the triangle. So using this formula of half AB sine C, that's going to be a half times 5 times 5 times sine 60. Now if you're not too great with exact values of trig, there's a quick way of learning them. So here we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, all over 2. We've got sine here at the top, and we've got cos at the bottom, and this is 0, that's 30 degrees, that's 45 degrees, that's 60 degrees, and that is 90 degrees. Now for sine 60, I'm going to be wanting this one here. So sine 60 is going to be root 3 over 2. So what this then becomes is a half times 25 times root 3. And if I convert that into a fraction, what that then becomes altogether is 25 root 3 over 4. Now I've not finished the question, because now what I need to do is work out what that shaded area is going to be. So here the shaded area is going to be the area of the sector, which is 25 pi over 6 minus 25 root 3 over 4. Now what we want is we want to try and have a common denominator. So here our common denominator is a number that appears in the 6 and the 4 times table, which is 12. So to get 12, I multiply this first fraction by 2, so that becomes 50 pi over 12. And for this fraction here, to change the denominator from 4 to 12, I multiply that by 3. So that's going to become 75 root 3. Then joining this fraction up into one single fraction, it then becomes 50 pi take away 75 root 3 all over 12. And that is in the form that they wanted. So that there is my final answer. Now you don't need to state what A, B and C are, but you can see here A, B and C are both whole numbers or integers. So we've got A equals 50, B equals minus, or 75 I should say, because it's already minus, and C equals 3. Moving on to question 3, and again, if you haven't got this question printed, you may want to pause the video now and have an attempt at it. So looking at this question, it says Liam is trying to remember a 3-digit code. He knows that the rule has where the first digit is a cube number, the second digit is a factor of 16, and the third digit is an odd number. Liam tries a random code that matches the rule. Work out the probability that this is the correct code. So it's always really important that you do understand what they're actually asking, and sometimes it's useful highlighting that. So here we are working out the probability, because sometimes with these big mark questions it can get lost because you are doing so much maths. You kind of find out, you forget to put the icing on the cake, so to say. Now with this particular question, 0 is not going to be used because 0 is not a cube number, 0 is not a factor of 16, and 0 is not an odd number. So it's worth just making that clear to you that we don't need to use 0. So here, if I split this up, so here we've got the first digit and we've got the second digit and we've got the third digit. So here, looking at cube numbers that are single digit, that's basically going to be 1 or 8, because 3 cubed is 27, that's not single. So here we've got a total of 2 possible numbers. For the second digit, factors of 16, that's single digit, well that could be 1, 2, 4 and 8. So there are 4 possible numbers that could be. And the third digit, we're looking at odd numbers, so that's 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. So there are 5 possible outcomes. So here the total combinations that Liam could pick is going to be 2 times 4 times 5, which is 40. So the probability of him picking the correct number is going to be, so here the probability of a correct code is therefore going to be 1 over 40. Moving on to question 4. So again, if you've not had a chance to print off this question, I strongly recommend you pause the video and have a go at it. So this question says that a ship sails from P to Q and then Q to R. It says Q is 12 miles from P on a bearing of 0, 80 degrees, and R is 28 miles from Q on a bearing of 155 degrees. And the diagram shows that, and it's not drawn to scale. Now the question is asking us to work out the direct distance of P to R. So let's just highlight what it is they're actually looking at me to find. And so what I need to do is I need to work out this distance here, which I'm just going to call x. Now what you should be able to spot is this looks like a triangle, so we're going to be using trigonometry, and because we're not dealing with a right angle triangle, we're either going to be using the cosine or the sine rule. Now here, looking at this, what we need to do is try and work out what we know. So I can work out this angle because as the two north lines are parallel, these two angles here are going to be co-interior. So this angle here is going to be 180 minus 80, which is 100 degrees. And again, the reason for that is because it's I don't know what I'm doing there, so let's just rub that out. And the reason for that is because it's co-interior or supplementary, depending on what you want to call it. So then from that, what we can then do is we can then work out what this angle here is of PQR. And we can work that out because angles around a point add up to 360. So that's going to be 360, take away 100, take away 155, which leaves me with an answer of 105. So from this, I can then use the cosine rule because I've got 3 lengths and an angle where one of them is x. So then here we've got x, or let's label this up. So using a colour I've not used, let's go for this purple. So here I've got A, capital A, B and C. So the formula for the cosine rule is a squared equals b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cos A, and I always like to put brackets around the 2bc cos A. So substituting those numbers in, what do we get? Well, we're going to get x squared equals 12 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times 12 times 28 times cos of 105. Now I would definitely assume this is going to be a calculator question, so if I type that all into my calculator, I get x squared equals 1101.926398, and then I need to square root the answer, so x equals, and it works out to be 33.2 miles, and that's been rounded to 1 decimal place. Then moving on to question 5, it says that a plane of a flight of a plane was in 2 stages. The table shows information about the flight. In total, the flight lasted 2 hours. Work out the value of x. So for this, what we know is that the total flight is the first stage plus the second stage, and that all equals 2 hours. So what we've got is 731 over x plus 287 over x minus 24, and that equals 2. Now I don't need to worry about the units because time is measured in hours, and I've been given that it's 2 hours, so there's no conversions needed. So for this, what I need to do is find out what x is. So for this, you can see by writing it in this notation, it looks like algebraic fractions. So what we need to do here when we're adding is we need to now get a common denominator. Now typically our common denominator is usually the 2 denominators multiplied together. So let's write that. So a common denominator here is going to be x, and then x minus 24 in brackets. And let's just write that x a little bit so it doesn't look like a 3. So with the first fraction, I've multiplied that by the other denominator, so that's going to be 731x minus 24. And the second fraction, I've multiplied that by the first fraction's denominator, so that's going to be 8287x, and again that equals 2. So then what I can then do is join the numerators together, in which what I get is this all over x minus 24, and that equals 2. Now what I'm going to do now is just neaten this up, and again I would expect this to be on a calculator paper. It'd be very harsh if it was not on a calculator paper, but there you go. So here we get 731x minus 17544 plus 287x, and then I'm going to take this over to the other side, so I end up with 2x x minus 24. Now again, doing a bit of simplifying, I get an answer of 118x minus 17544 equals 2x squared minus 48x. Now here you can see that this is slowly starting to look like a quadratic, and we want to try and keep x squared positive and try and make it equal to 0. So if I take all that left hand side over to the side, I end up with 2x squared minus 1066x plus 17544 equals 0. Now at this stage we then want to solve this quadratic equation. Now there's a couple of ways in which we could do this. We could either factorize, and this does factorize. It'd be very good if you can spot that this factorizes, or we could use the formula, and it depends on however you want to do it. Now one thing you might spot is that each of the coefficients of x and the constant are all factors of, are all multiples of 2, so we can divide everything by 2. So if I divide everything by 2, I get x squared minus 533x plus 8772. Now you might think to yourself, well, I've not made that any easier. I'm still dealing with big numbers, but it just makes it easier for you to calculate, but it's not essential whether you want to do that. Now this does actually factorize, so believe it or not. So if we to factorize this, then the factorization is 2x minus 34 x minus 516 equals 0. if you were to factorize this, then we get x minus 17, x minus 516 equals 0. So they're two possible factorizations, in which if you then go on to solve it, I don't know why I'm trying to write in a highlighter, so here from this we get x equals 17 or 516. Now if you were to use the quadratic formula, a equals 1, b equals minus 533, and c equals 8772, or if you were to use the original statement here, then a would equal 2, b would equal minus 1066, and c equals 17544. So it really does depend on what you feel more comfortable with, but either way that's what you should have for substituting into the formula. And if you use the quadratic formula, you should still end up with those values. So using the quadratic formula, you should end up with x equals 17 or 516. Now, going back to the original question, if you write that as your final answer, you're only going to get 4 marks. And the reason for that is because if we look at the speed, and we've got two possible values of x. Now here, x can't equal 17, and the reason for that is because if x does equal 17, we're going to end up with negative speed travelling back on the second stage, and that's not possible. So here x cannot be 17. Now you don't need to write that, all you can do is kind of just ignore it. So the correct answer you should have is 516 for the 5 marks.